Alright folks, so welcome back. I decided to cut the last episode short because I wasn't sure how long it was going to go for, but we now have it back from work. I've cleaned the entire thing up. Everything's nice and clean, it's spotless. It's got rid of all the old junk and the crap that was in there. We've cleaned it all out with some compressed air, some kerosene. Everything is all now Mickey Mouse, so we can start reassembling the gearbox. Alright, so first thing we need to do is reassemble the reverse gear. So once again, this only goes in one way. So if you put it in the wrong way, it's not going to go. So clearly it doesn't go that way. Let's flip it around and it will sit like this. So that's in there now. That is going to move back and forth along there. So it is facing the right way. We need to grab our circlip and reinstall that. Alright, so it almost went on first go. Now it's on. Okay, cool. So we have the first part available on there for it to mate. Next thing we need to do is grab a couple of these. Alright, next thing is the reverse gear selector, so that'll sit directly just down in there. Now I do apologise if you can't see very well. I might just readjust the camera just so you can properly see. There we go, you can see. Alright, sweet, so now that's in there. So what we need to do now is fit the shaft with the new reverse idler gear. Alright, so I did order a new reverse gear, so this is the new one just here. I did open it before, it was just covered in a oily wax. So as you can see, this thing is nice and fresh and clean compared to the old one. So put the two side by side, you can see the clear difference in them, that obviously this one is quite worn, this one down here, whereas this one is nice and fresh. So that's the way it's going to go in there. We're going to now fit that. So you just grab your sleeve or your shaft, whatever you want to call it. That's going to sit directly down in here. You're going to fit the selector fork in the middle of these grooves just in here. And then it's going to slide in. Okay, so I've actually got this selector around the wrong way. It was facing the wrong way, so it was pushing too far towards the back of the gearbox. So I've just done a 180 with it. Try again. All right, now we just grab the shaft. Slowly just slide it in. Terrific. Now, just remember on this side, it does have that little notch cut out, so you don't want to push it in too far, but that's where it's going to sit. You want the notch facing upwards. All right, so next thing we want to do is just remove these two bolts here. There are a couple of springs and detent balls in there that just holds the selector rods up in on this side. So we need to remove those first, and then we can get on to reinstalling them and then put the balls and the springs back in and then retension it. All right, so see if we can get lucky here and pull out the springs and that. But if not, that's fine. Now, these do have copper washers you do need to replace every time you take them off. Well, it is good practice to replace them, so if you don't, you could run the risk that it's going to leak. All right, so I do apologise if you can hear the rain. Here in Australia, it is getting very hot lately, being in the middle of summer. By the time this episode has aired, it is going to be well and truly into probably autumn or winter. All right, so it is important to note as well that when you are reinstalling these, make sure you pre-fit the bolt and the nut. This will ensure that it will go on not only easier, but also enable you to help line it up with the aid of less stress. All right, so you can also use the witness mark on the shaft here as well as to where it needs to go, as to how far down you need to put it. I'm going to kind of do a bit of a MacGyver here, I reckon. Now with these, you can generally kind of wiggle it into position as to where it actually needs to be when it's fairly close. Because it has a tapered edge going in, you should be able to get it fairly close fairly quickly, I reckon. Alright, so it is quite fiddly to do, but once you've got that bolt started in there, you can then tighten it up by hand and then just nip it up using a spanner, I guess, and then do the locking nut as well. Alright, so once you've done the bolt up, grab yourself a 7/16 spanner and just nip up that lock nut. Now, like I said, you don't need to swing off this thing. You don't need to do it up overly tight. It's only just a locking nut. So all this shaft is ever doing is just moving back and forth. See how I was applying pressure with one finger there? That's pretty much all we need. So confirm that the shaft is locked. Terrific. Now we know we can reinstall that. Now we can reinstall the second shaft. Now I'll just go back to saying what I was on about before. Make sure you install them in the correct order in which you remove them. Otherwise you start pulling them apart in different orders. You will then find that you won't be able to install it correctly. Alright, so it's worthwhile noting that one slides directly in there. It needs to go over that selector down where the reverse gear is. That's what actually enables it to move back and forth along that shaft, just in there. So make sure you install that one first and then reinstall the third rod. Now same thing again, install the fork. Sorry that I'm covering the camera. Wiggle it in until you find where the bolt hole is and then nip it up. All right, now it is worthwhile noting as well, just do this up by hand first. If you're going to use a extension or a socket, that's fine, but don't use any tools until you are sure that it is fitting on there correctly. So a good way to know that it's been fitted and it's not loose, other than with the bolt not being in far enough, is just to rotate the shaft and make sure she's able to be moved. If she is, you can then go and tighten it. So I'm going to roll this all the way forward, make sure that lock nut is loose. Alright, so I'm going to just grab a extension and a socket. I'm going to grab my ratchet. I'm just going to nip this up like I did the other one. Alright, cool, that's tightened up. Now we just grab our other socket, so 7/16, and then nip up the locking nut for the selector rod holding bolt. Now like I said, you don't need to tighten them up too much. Once they are in and on, we're right to send that all the way home. So third and final one is the first shaft. So this last one is going to go through where the rod is for reverse. So just down in here. Alright, so this is just going to be a little bit difficult to try and film, hold and insert it all at the same time. But I've got at least one kid, so I'm somewhat good at that. Line this up and then put the top bolt in there as well. Now the plunger at this end just here was being a little bit stiff and wasn't wanting to come out. So what I'm going to do is just grab a screwdriver. I'm going to push that plunger as far up as it'll go, push the shaft in, and once it gets in far enough, it should overtake the pressure of the spring, and then you should be able to install it the entire way. Yeah, there we go. So now that's in the first click. You just have to have a look and just make sure that this bolt hole is lined up with where we need it to be, and then we can put the last securing bolt in for the selector shaft just down in here. Alright, I'll just grab a ratchet and just make sure we're guiding it in the entire way and nothing's stopping it. Like I was saying before, always do up stuff by hand first, never just send it with a ratchet or a rattle gun or any sort of impact tools. Otherwise you're going to find you're going to have a very bad time pretty damn quick. Now to ensure that it's in gear, you're just going to grab a pry bar and just lever it at the opposite end, just to make sure that it actually moves on the shaft. Cool. So we are engaging and disengaging. Now that we've confirmed that, we know that she's in the right spot, and we're going to nip up that bolt and then the lock nut as well. Alright, so everything is moving nice and freely. So we're just going to go through and just make sure that we can get all of these selections. So that one's good, the second one's good. Obviously we don't have the detent springs and bearings in this end, but we do have it at the very end of this one. The reverse. Cool, terrific. Just leave that one back. Wicked, excellent. So we now have them all in. So what we're going to go do now is come back over here. Sorry, I just grabbed the camera. We're going to come back over here. We're going to reinstall the detent springs, so these here, and then the plungers as well. Then we can reassemble the rest of the gearbox. All right, so next thing we need to do is reinstall the plungers. So these little suckers just here, and the springs as well. So the plungers go first, then the spring, and then the end bolt, I guess. All right, so a really good point to take into consideration here is make sure that once the selector forks are in on the shafts, it is back in neutral. So there's a gap between the end of the fork and the housing, and both of them are in the middle. So if you move it one way, it'll click. If you move it back to the middle here, it will click again, and then it will go back the opposite way. So pretty much you want each gear to be in neutral. Neutral meaning between two gears. So that's Tomo's tech tip. All right, so we need to fit this end first, down inside here, and the other end inside there as well. Now I should also make note that these selector forks in a rod change or even an 850 are super hard to come by. So if you're looking for them, these are probably one of the only sets left in Australia, brand new, that I was able to find. I wasn't able to buy them from Mediasport because they didn't have any available, nor did they have any available in the UK. So it is worthwhile noting that these are a very difficult part to find, especially for remote change, not rod change. Rod change is a bit easy to find. These for remote change are quite difficult. Mainly also because the bespoke places that manufacture these in the UK during COVID, they're all shut down. So it sucks because it is what it is. There's literally nothing we can do about it, which absolutely sucks, but it is what it is. So now we got that in, we can then reinstall the fourth gear on the end here with the bearing, and same on this side here. Make sure before you install it, the bearing is fitted inside there. If you don't, you are going to have a very bad time rather quickly. So just line that up with where it needs to be. You will also find that it does need to be pressed inside there with the bearing on there. So what we're going to do is press this side in. So we're going to get a soft face hammer or a dead blow. We're going to push it in. We're going to fit the circlip. Then we're going to fit this bearing on this side here. All right, so just nice and gently. All right, so hear that audible sound? That means that she is engaged. So we just want to turn the shaft. Exactly, that's what we want. What we need to do is grab the giant circlip and reinstall that. That's this sucker just here. So grab the world's biggest pair of circlip pliers. Not really, that is just an Australian joke. I'm not actually referring to the largest pair in the world. All right, there we go. So heard how that snapped in. That is now fitted and installed. What we're going to do is roll it back over. I did just lose one of the bearings inside there, so we just need to make sure that we can reinstall it correctly and we haven't done any damage to it, which I don't think we would have. That just needs to get fitted back down inside there. Give the gear a bit of a wiggle and she will just slide directly back inside there. Now what we need to do is grab the double roller bearing. So this one just here, I'll just adjust the camera so you can properly see. This one only goes in one way as well. It does have a lip on the outside here because it does have a circlip. So we're just going to drop that directly down in there. We're going to grab a punch and we're going to be super careful. So we just want to be pressing on the inside of the bearing. So just down inside here, we want to be pressing on here. You don't want to be pressing here, nor do you want to be pressing here. You want to just be pressing there all the way around. And get a punch as well that's not too big. That way it's going to ensure that you're not going to damage it. All right, so once again, you can hear the audible tone of it change as you're pushing it in. So listen for those sort of things as well when you're doing these sort of jobs, that if something's changing tone, chances are it might be catching, it might be touching, it might have been recessed all the way down. So next thing left to do is reassemble this side, then we can install the lay shaft, do the oil pickup, etc, etc. So let's get to it. All right, so before we install the lay shaft, grab your bushes. Carefully don't drop the bearings like I just happened to do before. Sometimes you can also reinstall these bushes once you've got the lay gear in. Right, wiggle it down in there. Terrific. Now we just grab the lay shaft. Remember that this only goes in one direction as well. Just give that a bit of a wiggle until it gets all the way in. You might just need to give it a light tap to be able to guide it through. Sometimes as well the shim gets in the way, so just give that a bit of a push once you've lined up the shim to where it needs to be. Cool, so that'll pretty much go all the way in until it stops, because it is tapered, remember. So also at this end, you've got to make sure as well that the cutout is facing upwards. All right, so before we fit this sucker, we're just going to realign this spacer just here with where it needs to sit. So I'm fairly confident it's going to go in something like this. Just got to wiggle that lay shaft in just a little bit more. Alright, next thing we're going to be installing is this little shim just here. So it goes in just like this. Just want to make sure that you align the bolt hole with where it needs to sit, and this bit here as well. So I've got it a little bit high at the moment. I might just be able to turn that around just with the lay shaft, slide it back in, give it a wiggle. Right, so once you've got the shim fitted in there, you can then grab the housing along with the steel shim and you can fit that as well. Now what I like to do here is just pre-fit a bolt with one of these lock tabs on it. Just start it by hand, and that just gives you the option to roll it around and fit the other bolt inside there and have everything lined up. Okay, so we'll just get the other bolts started by hand and then we can go and tighten them all up. Alright, so like I was saying before, make sure you always tighten bolts by hand before sending it with a railgun or a ratchet or a spanner. That way you can just ensure that it's been done up properly, you're not going to cross thread it. Right, so all I'm going to do here is just get my rattle gun and just nip it up. Terrific. Now, get the torque settings, torque those up, then put the diff pinion in. Alright, so I had a quick look in my mini book. I couldn't see what the torque setting was, but we're just going to nip these up just by hand. Now we're going to do these on a bit of an angle as well, like you would wheel nuts as well, just to ensure that we do it up evenly. Alright, and also make sure that you bend the lock tabs over as well to make sure that the bolts don't come loose. So we grab the diff pinion, that'll go next. That'll go on either way, it doesn't matter which way it goes. So that'll just slide all the way in. Now we do have a new diff pinion lock tab as well, so you just have to line that up with where it needs to be. There's only a little bit of the cutouts showing on the end of the shaft. Now, do up the nut. This is where it comes fun. By fun, I mean if you've got a second person, perfect. If you don't, then you are going to be struggling. So, same thing again. We are going to be locking fourth gear. Terrific. And first gear, that's probably a bit of overkill. Okay, so first, fourth are locked. Now, we can go and tighten up the pinion nut. All right, so you want to be tightening this one to 150 foot-pound. Once you've tightened it, once again, bend these tabs back over. Now, just remember as well, that we do have it locked in 2 gears. What we're going to do now is just rotate this and we're going to tap down every third flat on this washer, and that will lock the tab at the end. All right, so one of the last things left to do is to put this back on once it decides to line up. Slide that all the way in. We do have the old lock tab. I don't have a new one. I should have ordered one. A little bit annoyed I didn't, but anyway, it'll be fine. And then we're just going to grab the nut and reinstall it. All right, so once again, we're just going to lock the gears and then we are going to tighten that nut to 150 foot-pound again. All right, so I've just worked out that I did a bit of a mistake. What I am about to do is fit a center oil pickup. Center oil pickup is really good if you want to decrease cornering oil pressure. So what happens is you're flying around a track, you hang a left-hand corner, all the oil sloshes to the right-hand side of the engine where the oil pickup is. Perfect. You then head around a couple of right-hand corners and you're doing Mach 3. All the oil is then sloshed to the other side of the gearbox, and it is the quickest way to destroy your engine. So what you need to do there to prevent the oil sloshing side to side is do a center oil pickup. That goes inside the gearbox just here. As we know, with the original one, it went from just down here to in the corner. So that's all good. Now, this one goes down in here. I reckon it needs to go under that lay shaft, but I can't get it in because the lay shaft is down there. So if I try and push it in there, it just won't go because it's catching on the gear here. Now, if I'm doing this wrong, please someone in the comments let me know. But what I'm going to have to do now is come back to this end. I'm going to probably have to remove the bolts just around here. I'm gonna have to pull that lock tab out, and then I should, fingers crossed, be able to pull that lock tab out and then slide the lay shaft out, pull the lay shaft gear assembly out somewhat, hopefully fit that, and then we should be able to get it all back in. So fingers crossed, let's see how we go. All right, so essentially what you have to do here is kind of MacGyver it all. So what I did was line up where the oil pickup needs to be in its little slot, and then just guide the lay shaft gear assembly in as it goes down. Then we should, obviously being the operative word like it always is, be able to get it back in, line it back up, and away we go. Now there we go, terrific. Now I did just miss putting in the shim at this end, so this one here. So I'm gonna have to take that back out. So what I've done is fit the oil pickup. There is a little hole just down in here, in this part of the casing. You can't exactly see because my hand's there. So where this line is just here, there is a little hole, not that one just there where my finger is now, but just down below there. So as you roll it down, it'll line up in there. Now what we're gonna do, and I apologise that I can't exactly film and hold and do 12 things at once because I'm not a woman, but we're just gonna roll this back inside here. We should be able to get it all lined up, and then we'll be all Mickey Mouse, ready to put the lay shaft back in and then continue on with the build. All right, so lining up, that's good. Ta-da, as my nearly 4-year-old says. Right, so put the lay shaft back in. Okay, got it in, and then we can assemble it back together. Then we can keep going with it. Fingers crossed, no more issues. Right, so inside the gearbox, we have this little bolt hole here. What I'm going to do is just put a bolt with a nut on the other end, and I'm just going to Loctite it. That way it's going to be nice and tight. It's never going to come loose. I'm not sure if you're supposed to leave the original bracket in there, which is this one here, that has 2 nuts welded in there. Now, you probably are, but in our case, it should be okay, simply because this pipe is never really moving. It may have a little bit of heat through it, it may have some oil pressure through it, but it's not going to cause any sort of damage if we just put a nut and bolt there. Even if we left it out, it's probably not the most advisable thing because it could rattle loose and then crack a weld and then see you later engine. But I reckon if we just put a bolt and nut through there with a bit of Loctite on it, or even a castellated, not a castellated nut, a nylock nut on the end, it should be okay to hold it. Now on this side, we need to make sure that we fit a new gasket. So I've got that one here. I'll grab a nut, put that on, put the new gasket on, and then we can start reassembling the rest of it. Right, so like always, we're using a bit of Permatex Aviation former gasket. Just gonna make sure that we remove as much of the old debris on there as we can, because it's been sitting for a while. You don't need a heck of a lot, but you do need enough just to cover both sides. So we're just going to cover it like that. Now this stuff is quite sticky as well, so hence part reason why I'm wearing gloves. So we're just going to place it here, flip it, get a little bit more. Now remember, this is non-hardening as well, so when you pull it off, it's just a bit of brake cleaner or a razor blade, or even just a bit of emery cloth just to help scuff up the surface to remove the original stuff. Now, see if we can get lucky and do this first time. Oh, nope. Good thing we've got a pick handy. All right, so there's also one on the back side of it as well. I'll just grab the camera and show everyone. So there's one just here as well. So we just need to get the plate, clean up the plate, the inside of it, put a bit of sealant around here, bolt it on, and then away we go. All right, so last thing I'm going to show you before I put all this back together is removing and replacing the selector shaft seal. You can use a screwdriver for this, but I luckily have a ice pick, I guess you'd call it. That is a seal removing tool. So this is a really easy thing to change while it's out. I think from memory it does have a spring inside here. Yeah, it does. You can't really see, but there is one down in there. Even though it's not leaking, we're going to change it anyway. And you're probably asking yourself why you're changing something that's not leaking. You know, like the old saying says, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We're here now, we might as well. The fact that we have to remove the shaft to get the gearbox apart means that we are moving the seal beyond its normal parameters. So there might be a little bit of debris and crap inside the shaft where it goes through the seal. So we've got it out now. We might as well just change it while we're here. So that'll just go in there, nice and snug. Push it all the way down with your fingers. It does have a little stop in there as well. So once it gets in there, it's not going to go any further than what the stop allows it. So you don't really need to use any tools for that. That's pretty much in there all the way, and then that's it. Make sure as well that it is in there nice and square, so it is nice and even all the way around. I'll probably just need to fix it up just a little bit because there is a couple little higher and lower spots, but I'll get that sorted in a minute. Alright, so you've pretty much seen everything that I've done on this gearbox, and if you haven't, you can see other videos that I've done, like on the Morris 850, of when I went through everything step by step on how to reassemble this. Essentially now we just have the selector shaft, we have the end casing go back on, we need to put the diff back on, we need to reshim the diff. If you haven't already, make sure to check out on how to reshim the diff in the video listed above, should I say, can't even speak English. Once all the gearbox is pretty much assembled, we're then going to get back on the engine. So in the next episode, you're going to see me, essentially the engine is going to be assembled to the gearbox, and then I'm going to strip the head, I'm going to rip it off. I think he replaced the thermostat housing at one stage, so I'm not even going to touch that, simply because I know it's been done somewhat recent. We're going to throw a new water pump in there, do the rear push rod case covers. We're going to put the new timing chain on. We're going to put a vernier style timing chain on it as well, and then start to reassemble the engine, clean it all down and put it back together. So you're probably wondering what this thing is behind me. Well, I don't know, you're gonna have to wait and see on another episode. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you're enjoying the episodes, hope you're enjoying the channel and everything that I've been putting out here. I've been working so hard over Christmas and the New Year's to get up to date with all this stuff. So at the time of filming, it is early January 2023, but I do have a backlog of a lot of stuff, and that's what enables me to take the time off during December and January to catch up on everything I've got planned. We have some really big and exciting news coming up, which you've already seen. Obviously the biggest news of the year so far is I'm now sponsored by Minisport. So guys, make sure you check out the full range at minisport.com.au, along with all the other videos that I've been doing, reviewing and talking about different parts and tools and equipment that you can buy from their website. So guys, stay tuned. Once we finish this, we have something else really exciting to get on, a project I've never actually worked on. Well, I've kind of worked on it once, but it was literally for about half an hour, got it going, drove it out the driveway. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned, stay COVID safe, and we'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune Ups.